Hello, my name is Chandler Klebs, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how determinism and the knowledge that everything is caused and that we don't have a free will change the world. And I want to start out by reading the first chapter of this book that George Ortega wrote. See this book here? It's Free Will, Its Refutation, Societal Cost, and Role in Climate Change Denial. And this is a very good book because it's a very short book. I highly recommend his other book, which is Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. Like, if you want to know all the details about why free will is impossible, George covers it out very detailed in this book. But if you're impatient and you just want to get straight to why we don't have a free will and why it matters so much, I think you need to read this book. And that's why I'm recommending this book, Free Will, Its Refutation, Societal Cost, and Role in Climate Change Denial by George Ortega. I'm going to read the first chapter here, and then I'm going to talk about all that it means to me and to the world. The question of whether humans have a free will is no small matter. Searle, quoted in Blackmore, 2005, asserts that for our world to acknowledge free will as an illusion would represent a bigger revolution in our thinking than Einstein or Copernicus or Newton or Galileo or Darwin. It would alter our whole conception of our relation with the universe. The traditional challenge to free will comes from determinism, in the sense that nature is fundamentally causal, and causal antecedents to a human decision regress back to before the decider's birth. Psychologists like Baumeister, 2008, claim that determinism has not been nor can it be proved, and philosophers like Mill, 2012, contend that free will has not been disproved by science. While science deals with levels of confidence rather than proof, I argue that science evidences the causality at the heart of determinism and refutes free will with a level of confidence comparable to our knowledge that the universe exists and that it is in constant motion. Free will is prohibited by a causal principle that is A, universal and a priori, B, necessary to quantum mechanical prediction, C, required by the law of conservation of momentum, D, necessary to the scientific method, and E, a result of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and evident in simultaneous particle positions and momentum measurement. Mechanisms put forth as alternatives to determinism and labeled indeterministic, random, acausal, causal sui, ex nihilo, probabilistic, and numinous either prohibit free will even more strongly or are in actuality fundamentally causal. After describing the above refutations, I applied them to free will defenses advanced in 4 articles: Baumeister, 2008, Fingaret, 2008, Mill, 2012, Meyer, 2011. Reiterating them relative to the relevant contexts. Because terms like determinism, indeterminism, and free will have various meanings, for clarity and accuracy, I directly quote, especially in representing the author's free will arguments, as empirical evidence against free will mounted. Labette, Gleason, Wright, and Pearl, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'll skip all those names. Researchers like Vose and Schooler became concerned that disbelief in free will may be harmful. I challenge their methodology and posit that free will belief likely causes more harm than good, especially as a catalyst for climate change denial. Okay, now, that's the first chapter. And that's actually not too long of a chapter. But I get why determinism is true and why free will is impossible. I mean, and it's just so obvious. First of all, you have to understand it matters. And the quote by Searle explains that it's bigger than anything by Einstein or Copernicus or Newton or Galileo or Darwin. But basically, the reason that the traditional challenge to free will as determinism is exactly as George said it in here. Basically, nature is fundamentally causal, and causal antecedents to a human decision regress back to before the decider's birth. So the point is, everything has a cause, and each of those causes has a cause that caused it. And so everything I'm doing today stems from something that existed before I was born, before I was conceived, before my parents had sex, before my parents were conceived, before my grandparents had sex. Do you get what I'm saying? It goes back infinitely. And the fact that today I can read stuff that was written by ancient Greek philosophers, ancient different philosophers throughout the millennia that have talked about the question of free will and determinism, shows that though I would not be reading this stuff if they hadn't written it long before I existed. So everything we do regresses back to before we existed, because the past goes back infinitely. And even if there was a certain beginning to the universe 13 billion years ago or whatever, that wouldn't matter for our lifespan, because we are not free from all the prior causes, and all our decisions have to be based off of something. Because either our decisions are causal. We are caused to believe something and not believe something else, or we're caused to prefer to eat this food and not that food. Or a really great example is, why are people attracted to some people and have sex with some people but not others? Think about that. What's the cause of that? It's not a free choice. It's not like the only way you could have a free choice would be one that wasn't based on anything. So it had to be random or acausal, like there'd be no reason or no cause for it. And some people believe in randomness, but the point is, okay, if you believe in a random will, that you can randomly choose something and freely choose something, and there's no reason for you doing it, well, okay. I disagree that it's acausal, because there's going to be some unconscious reason for it. But let's say that it is random. Well, you can't expect to be credited or blamed. You can't expect reasonably to be rewarded or punished based on your choice that's random. Now, people might punish you or reward you for something you do, but that doesn't mean you deserve it, because you can't actually deserve reward or punishment, because either it stems from causes that go back to before you existed, or it's random or acausal and had nothing to do with you, had nothing to do with your personality or your knowledge or anything. So it's just completely out of causality. Okay, but here's the deal. Why is this such a big deal? I'll tell you why it's a big deal. Because we don't have to feel the pain of guilt, like you do something wrong and you feel bad about it. And I think that's okay. We feel bad, like realizing we hurt somebody or did something wrong. Of course, that is also based on what we're taught is right or wrong. So that's another complicated thing. But here's the thing: is that if you realize you did something wrong, you correct it. If you just realize you did something wrong. But if you start feeling guilty, like you're a bad person because you chose to do something wrong, well, then that means that you're believing in free will, and you believe that you could have in the past done otherwise than what you did. Now, it may appear to other people that you could have done otherwise. You might even look back and think, well, why didn't I do that instead of that? Well, the short answer is because it didn't occur to you to do the most logical or reasonable or, most moral thing at that time. And here's the deal is, George Ortega, he's really concerned about climate change. And it's a big deal, because basically, because of the pollution that people have been doing, and there's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, I just recently learned about this myself, that climate change is a real thing. I've read some stuff, and I watched Al Gore's movie Inconvenient Truth, and I started realizing, whoa, the ice is melting from the Arctic, Antarctic, and possibly Greenland. So the sea levels are going to rise like 20 feet and kill people who live on coastal of the world. So billions of people are going to die if it continues like that. And so here's the thing is, it seems that to make efforts to do something about climate change and stop the pollution is the pro-life thing to do. I'm serious, because here's the deal. What I'm saying is that someone who cares about reversing climate change is pro-life, just the same as if you're pro-life in another sense, like that you're against war, or you're against abortion, or you're against, animal slaughter and torture, so you're vegan, because that's what I'm talking about. This is about life. This is about what's best for life on the planet as a whole, not necessarily what's best for us as individuals, although it is better for us individuals. What's good for the group is good for the individuals of that group. But the thing is, yeah, we've all contributed to various problems, but we've also done good too. And we don't need to blame ourselves for all the bad that's gone on in the world, because a lot of it, there's nothing that we haven't done, because people did it before we existed. But we've done harm too. But if we just work together and solve problems rather than just blaming somebody else, we can blame ourselves or blame somebody else, but you know what? Blaming does not help. And if we get rid of the blame and the retribution and the revenge and the hatred and anger that leads to war and all kinds of violence, our world will be better. And I think that's the essential message of why determinism will change the world, and why what John Searle said is true, and why George Ortega's theory about how free will belief leads to climate change denial is true.